Welcome to Getting to Know Jesus. We are in lesson 33, which is on page 81 through 89 in your book. The Bible text for our lesson is on pages 82 and 83. And on pages 84 through 89, there is some space if you want to write notes in these books. Now, these books are yours to keep. Northside Christian Church did pay for them. If you want to give Richard $12 for the book, then he'll be grateful, but if not,
normally
don't worry about it.
Normally they're 16, aren't they, Glenn? Normally they're 16. We got a Glenn Copple wholesale. You got a wholesale deal. Yeah, we got a super deal because we're
set up.
My arm. No, we're due. We get 10 every session times 4.
We're going to have to print. I'm going to have to print more than 10 if we keep a crowd like this coming.
Oh,
it's the food, Glenn. Get real.
She didn't say chocolate cake. Oh, Lord. We're grieving. We're grieving. Oh,
This
is our video.
Well, there's people that do watch us on
That's going on the website.
Yeah, worry about it, right?
It's going around the world.
Now listen, Glenn, I was going to come just for the study. I didn't know nothing about the food.
Hey, I'm here for Jesus.
I like my neighbors.
We didn't know anything about food.
We're made, our lesson notes are on pages 84 through 89 if you want to write notes there. Here's our little timeline. Now in volume 1, we were up here in the first 30 years of Jesus' life. Volume 2 covered actually about his first year of ministry. We're in volume 3 now, and we're coming into the second year of ministry. So that will give you an idea of where we are as we are going through the life and teachings of Jesus. And just a little tidbit to you. As we go down this line, that arrow is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter because most of the New Testament is spent on the events of the consummation. Here after 33, about 4 or 5 volumes of the Getting to Know Jesus Bible Study series will be right down in there. So, what a ride. Well, how to have right priorities is what we're going to talk about tonight.
Wow.
And for those of you that have not, we usually encourage you to read the lesson during the week because I don't go over what's written in the book. I'm giving you additional material. That's another reason why you might want to take notes and add them to the book. Next week you'll want to read lesson 34 and you'll be all primed and ready, and you do your discussion questions, you'll be almost as popular as Sylvia is.
Hey Glenn, can I ask one?
You can ask your
dumb
question.
And then I'll ask any more. I was listening to a Christian channel that was talking about the beatniks that started in San Francisco in the 50s and 55, 60s. Was there any connection to our brother Jesus and them, or what? I don't have any. I remember any.
I don't know enough about the beatniks to really tell you, except for I had a good friend in college that was
followed it.
Oh.
The beatniks were first, and then the Jesus movement sort of moved right into the vacuum that it left.
And Jesus movement spawned in California and spread across, and it was
many years. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Like so many other things, it was a blow in the wind, and it had its time, and it subsided. And there were good things about it, and I heard some things that weren't so good about it, but that's not what we're going to dwell on. We're going to talk about how we can have right priorities, though, with anything that comes today or in the future, because, hey, there may be another. I'm hoping, in all honesty, I'll be flat out honest with you, I'm hoping and praying we can get a Getting to Know Jesus movement started across this nation to get the United States back to being one nation under God, instead of going the path we've been going the last 3+ years.
Wow.
So how to have right priorities. Have you ever been around a control freak?
Yeah.
Maybe you've been the control freak, huh?
The people in the back can't tell who's looking at you.
Have you ever been influenced by someone else only to find out later that they were wrong? They told me this, I believed it at the time, I find out later that they were wrong. We've all gone down that road. How many times have you been the one that told somebody something and you found out later that you were wrong?
I'm not admitting.
Now, a lot of times, now some people are innocently wrong. I just didn't realize that this was not correct. Now that I realize it, I changed my story. Some people are deceivers, and they'll tell you what's wrong because they want to deceive you, and there's no honesty in them. Jesus will fix that too. Well, have you ever confronted someone to explain that they were wrong in their thinking? Oh, yes. Now, was it a discussion or was it an argument?
Starts out a discussion, usually ends.
Were you married to this person? Oh, we don't want to go there. How can you know if you have the right priorities, and how do you respond to those who wrongly accuse you of wrongdoing? We're going to see if we can look into that tonight. I talked with a minister about the Getting to Know Jesus Bible Study series and the possibility of him doing it at his church. He asked what Bible translation I used, and promptly rejected the material because it was not the right translation, spelled KJV. He felt that controlling which do what?
Was that the translation the Apostle Paul used?
The Apostle Paul, Jesus himself used the King James Version of it. Oh, wait a minute here.
I think that was King Joe.
It was the Greek translation from the King James Version. Something like that. Well, this individual felt that controlling which translation was being used was more important than the benefit one would gather from a study in the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. In that particular regard, he was being a control freak. Now, there are some areas where we do need to exercise control, but we need to have some wisdom and discernment on how to have the right priorities, which things to control and which things not to control. In lesson 33 of Getting to Know Jesus, Jesus is having some interference with some control freaks of his culture. They're called the Pharisees. The Pharisees are starting to look for every reason they can imagine to find fault with Jesus with what he is doing. They misunderstand their job, and they try to maintain power of some authority over someone else who teaches the ways of God.
They were not fair, you see.
They were not fair, you see.
Sadducees. They were Sadducees.
I have seen churches ruined by elders who thought it was their job to guard the traditions instead of promote the gospel.
Ask Paul.
Right.
We have a good friend in California who's driving an airport shuttle now. The guy's got the gift of preaching. He should be in a pulpit. But the elders controlled him right out of a job and totally out of the ministry. And that is a travesty. As Jesus is walking through a grain field on the way from one place to another, his disciples pick some heads of grain. They rub it in their hands to get rid of the husk and eat the grain. To the Pharisees, this is harvesting. And since it's the Sabbath, they believe that harvesting a bite or two of grain constitutes work, and therefore is a violation of the Mosaic law to the rest of the Sabbath and do no work. So, what do? Well, number one, you establish right priorities by confronting them head on. Matthew chapter 12 verses 1 and 2, Mark chapter 2 verses 23 and 24, Luke 6 verses 1 and 2. And you see we've got them right here side by side on the page, just like they are on page 82 in your book. At that time, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields. Matthew says on the Sabbath. Mark and Luke established it was on the Sabbath, through the grain fields. And his disciples were hungry. They walked along. They began to pick some of the grains and rub them in their hands and eat the kernels. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." Isn't it powerful to see how Matthew, Mark, Luke are telling you the same story? Word for word. They had their own little nuances because each one had their own little audience.
The labor was threshing wheat on the Sabbath.
They were threshing grain on the Sabbath. I talked to my brother-in-law when he was doing the wheat harvest back in Kansas years ago.
Amazing.
Jesus replies to their grumbling by establishing his relationship with God.
Amen.
He doesn't try to hide or cower, hoping that they'll go away and leave him alone. How many times have we gotten in a situation where a little controversy here? So you can't pray in Jesus' name. I might violate, I might be offended or something like that. And so we cower in the corner. And a small minority of the population is silencing the majority of Christians because we don't counter.
Yeah.
Stand
You
up.
know, Jesus was dealing, calling them, that was a sin they were doing.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the whole ball of wax even nowadays.
Yeah.
I didn't used to know this.
There are times when we have to confront evildoers and expose their wrongdoing. We can't just ignore it and hope it will go away. The reason the ACLU, the atheists, the LGBT, the homosexual activists, the Muslims, and a lot of other atheists and non-Christian groups are making the roads they are and silence of Christians is because the church, the Christians, you and I, don't hurt me, please. I won't say a thing, just don't hurt me. And now, it's part of our human nature to be afraid of confrontation. We prefer to avoid it. But as Christians, we are at war with people who are working for the devil.
Amen.
And if we don't have enough Christ in us to confront those people and say, wait a minute, you're doing the devil's work, I'm doing God's work, and I can't allow you to do that unopposed, they're going to take over. And we won't be anymore. Well, another thing, oh, look at this. Grain of field. Field of grain. This is,
That was really good.
I'm always like this on Mondays.
Double dose of humor.
It's not Monday? Oh.
Not Monday, honey.
Well, here's a field grain from somewhere in Israel. I don't recognize the mountain, so I can't tell you where it was, but it was in Israel. Because I know the people that took the picture, and they were there.
Israel Valley.
So the second thing we want to do after we confront them head on is establish our priorities. Matthew chapter 12 verses 3 and 4, Luke 2 verses 25 and 26, and Mark 2 and Luke 6 verses 3 and 4. Now, Jesus, this referred to Jesus, Jesus answered them, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? In the days of Abiathar the priest, Mark adds. Now, the Jews don't need to know this because they already know it. Matthew wrote to the Jews. Mark wrote to the Romans, so he's establishing this to the Romans so that they will, check their little Jewish history book, and Abiathar was a priest to the Jews, okay. And of course Luke writes to the Gentiles, and they put this all together. Now, Jesus continues, he entered the house of God with his companions, taking the consecrated bread and ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for them to do, but only for the priest. And he also gave some to his companions. So now by Mosaical law, David broke the Mosaical law. But the people revere David. So Jesus knows that pleasing God is much more important than pleasing man. You and I and others may be wrong in some of our judgments, especially if we're not reading our Bible and praying for God's wisdom and understanding in what we're reading. So here again, my challenge is not to sit out here and judge the world. My challenge is to say, am I being who I need to be? Am I reading the Bible right? Especially as a teacher, I need to communicate to you right information because God will hold me accountable. And likewise, you need to say, God, am I getting the right understanding out of this? Am I making the right application? God, how do I talk to these people and help them understand this is what the Bible teaches, not that? So we're constantly in a process of self-examination. You and I may be wrong in some of our judgments. So it is essential that you be in intimate fellowship with God so you will know how to answer when people try to accuse you wrongly. Now my premise is this. The closer you are in your relationship with God, the better equipped you are going to be to give an answer when somebody tries to silence you for your faith. Whether it be somebody from the world, there's a lot of them out there, or even somebody from a different denomination trying to pick with you over some little denominational tradition. Your denomination believes this. Well, my denomination believes that. That makes me holier than you because you don't believe the right way. I used to think like that too. But I've come to realize that when we get to heaven, God is not going to ask about which denomination you belong to. He's not going to care about whether you believe about the kind of music you used, or half a dozen other little things that we make doctrines out of. There's only going to be one question, and that's who's Jesus? And if we get together on that question, number one, we're going to be more intimate with God. Number two, we're going to have better fellowship with one another. Number three, we're going to have more power to go out and engage the world and point them to Jesus. Now here's another important fact, and that is to communicate the truth in love. Matthew embellishes on this a little bit. Or haven't you read in the law that the Sabbath, the priest in the temple desecrate the day, and yet they are innocent? In other words, the priests work on the Sabbath day, and if you don't think that preaching isn't work, you haven't tried it. Richard, how many times do you get worn out after you preach a Sunday sermon?
It says like digging a ditch all day long.
Yeah, sometimes you have to go home and rest a bit before you can finish the day, don't you? I know sometimes I'm worn out, sometimes I get energized, but a lot of times I need to sit down and rest a bit. Jesus continues, I tell you the one greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That's pretty potent. So communicate the truth in love. Jesus presented his case to the accusers in a way that showed them that they were wrong in their application. Now I know there's been a lot of times I've believed things, and I come to talk to people, and later on realize, whoops, I was wrong in my application. And there have been times I've had to go back and apologize. I've got some sermons in my drawer, and I have almost all of the sermons that I ever preached. And there's some of those sermons that will stay in that drawer forever, until I decide to donate them to the recycling plant or something. But, because I can't preach that sermon again, because my maturity of understanding the gospel says those things that I used to preach back then don't harmonize with what I've learned about Scripture as I've gotten closer to Jesus Christ. And by the way, I'm still working on it. I may have written a Bible study called Getting to Know Jesus, but I'm still working on my relationship with Jesus Christ. Next time I go through this class, all this stuff will could very well be different. That's because of new things I'm learning. So Jesus presents his case to show them that they are wrong in their application. He cites King David, the most revered of Israel's kings. Now David was considered a man after God's own heart. Surely he wouldn't desecrate the Mosaical law. But what does David do? He helped himself and his soldiers to bread that was designated for priests only. He also reminded them that the priests definitely worked on the Sabbath, so this is a prohibition of any kind of labor was foolish and missed the point of God's command. The idea of not working on the Sabbath, number one, you need to have a day where you break from the routine and rest. Number two, you need to have some time to worship God. And of course, some of you can worship God on your job. I think it's cool if you can be out there hammering nails or sweeping floors or putting widgets on wackets and making widget wackets or running a corporation, whatever it is you do. And if you can be praising God while you're doing that, that is powerful. But it's still good to have time when, you know what, it's enough putting widgets on wackets for now. I'm going to take a break and do something else today and go to church and worship God. And that's a good thing to do. So, King David, if he can break the Sabbath, then it means that there are things that are a little more important than rigid adherence to a set of laws. And bottom line is, God wants your heart. If you're working on your heart relationship with God, He'll take care of your actions. If you've got actions that aren't God-pleasing, your heart will convict you and you will make some adjustments in your behavior. And you don't have to be looking down the list, oh, see, I did this today. Oh, I didn't do that today. Oh, thank goodness I didn't do that. Oops, but I did this. Now, God is not going to run us down the list like that. Now, some of us have lived that way. Some denominations, in their good intentions, have tried to teach salvation by, well, you got to do this and do this and do this and do this, or you're not on in heaven list. And fortunately, as we're learning here, God cares more about our hearts. You will not have to accomplish anything positive. You will not accomplish anything positive by getting angry, forceful, authoritative, or hostile towards a control freak. We're going to encounter a control freak from time to time. A little diplomacy. Sometimes you just need to say, okay, thank you, and just go on and just ignore them. Sometimes you may not be able to ignore them. You may need to find some, sometimes it may be appropriate to comply, at least to a certain degree. Sometimes it may be appropriate to defy. I'm sorry, this is what you want, but this is not how I do things. You know, sometimes we try to tell people how to witness or how to go to church. You didn't wear a coat and tie to church. What's the matter with you? Remember the days when y'all got dressed up in your Sunday finest and went to church?
Had to wear gloves and hats.
Ladies had to wear a hat.
And gloves,
and so
white gloves.
T-shirts.
That's right.
Every week.
Yep, every week.
White gloves.
Yep.
Now there are still
At Easter
some,
you had a special bonnet.
there are still some churches that you would be very uncomfortable if you didn't wear your fancy clothes. And there was a bit of a reason for it. It was a matter of showing respect to God. Although it did become a matter, well, I got to go to church and impress the other people and so see how much respect I'm showing to God.
I remember the electric clippers.
The electric clipper,
To get the
yeah.
haircut, yeah.
Hey dude, you need a haircut. You can't come to our church. You need a haircut.
You remember?
Yeah.
Of all people?
Did they get you
We are learning.
Yes, yeah,
Now, with modern day, there are a lot of people that work in jobs that do not require them to wear suits. And there are some guys that don't own suits. And how many women wear hats today?
Very many.
Not many, unless they have some fancy
I saw
church.
one last Sunday.
You wore a hat last Sunday?
No, not me, but I saw one
Oh, you
lady.
saw a lady wear a
She
hat.
did always wear a hat in
Yeah,
church.
she
We
does.
used to
I think
always
she
wear hats in
does.
church. Yep,
Hey,
always.
back 20, 30 years ago when I was preaching full time, I wore a suit 6 days a week.
That's right.
I took it off Saturday.
Yeah. And he did too. You never wore it on.
But you know, what we're learning here,
traditional?
one of the things we're learning in this process is, like I said, a lot of people don't have suits. A lot of guys don't have suits. A lot of women don't have hats. Oh goodness, if I have to have a suit and hat to go to church, I'm not going to go to church. I am very impressed by the illustration of the young man that went into a church, kind of on the spur of it, and he had flip-flops and shorts and a ragged t-shirt. And this was a fine and upper proper inner city, highfalutin church. Hats, coats and tie, very proper, very formal. And he walks in and the church is full. Well, there's no place to sit. So he kind of embarrassingly walks down. The service has already started. He walks down to the front row, large auditorium. So there's a little bit of an aisle to go down. And he gets down to the front and sits down on the floor. Right there in the aisle. And one of the elders in the church, an older gentleman, with a few years of experience, and his coat and tie, starts coming down that aisle after this young man. Hobbling down there because he just doesn't get around as good as he did when he was younger. And the people are thinking, okay, we're going to have a scene here. He's going to escort that filthy young man improperly dressed out of this church. The old man gets down there beside the young guy, gets down on his hands and knees and sits right down beside him and they worship God together. He taught that church a lesson.
Wow.
It isn't what you wear. It's why you're there
Lord.
that counts.
I bet he got a crowd up in heaven. We're going to get an extra crowd for that.
I dare say that was probably more powerful than the best sermon that preacher could have ever preached that Sunday.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to know how to deal with a control freak. Sometimes you can avoid them, sometimes you can comply, but sometimes you can't comply. And sometimes you just need to feel, I feel like you're trying to control me and I am offended by you trying to control me. This violates my understanding of God's Word. This violates my personality and how God works with me and I work with Him. Sometimes you have to be firm but positive, respectful and polite. I had some people on Facebook that was challenging some of the comments that I posted. One had gone to the same Bible college where I got my master's degree, yet he was a liberal and called me on the carpet if I was a little too conservative in some of my comments. And I'm trying to think, how can you believe in the liberal agenda of abortion and homosexuality and a few other things and do that? Of course, there were some things that he did call me on that I needed to be corrected about. But I went back and forth with him. Finally, he decided to end that relationship until the next one comes along. And I'm sure over time, with 5,000 friends on Facebook, somebody will come along and think it's their job to be my little thorn in the flesh, to hold me accountable. Now, holding me accountable is not a bad thing, as long as they do it in a positive, respectful, and polite manner. Well, there's one more thing we want to talk about. Oh, here's a map. Now, we are, let's see, this is, okay, here's Jerusalem. Here's the Dead Sea right here. Here's Jericho. This is actually a satellite photo. That's why you see the mountain ranges here. You can kind of see how it's built up there. So we are in Jerusalem at this event. No, we were out in the fields of Judea, somewhere around here. I have no idea where Jesus was. Probably somewhere around here, going through the grain fields, picking the grains, and the Pharisees happened to be tagging along. Jesus has been around long enough that he developed a bit of an audience. Not just the 12 apostles, which he has not picked and named yet. He's got a following of quite a number of disciples. He's a groupie. He's got a fan club. And all the groupies are following him. And they're hanging out with him as much as they can. Some have to leave and go back to work, but they find out where Jesus is as soon as they get the work done, and they catch up on what's happening.
As I learn, we get that way too. We get that spiritual atmosphere around us, and people just
I have seen churches have awakenings or some sort of event, and for a while people would just flock into that church, and for a while it seemed Jerusalem grow. And then something would happen, and sometimes it would just slowly die down. Sometimes something serious would happen, and it'd just fall apart. So the caution there is don't put too much hope in man. We're all working at it one day at a time, and I'm not as perfect as I'd like you to think I am.
Sometimes you have speakers that are just extremely popular. Like, take for instance, Carl Ketcherside. He was that way.
There are some speakers that are extremely popular. They'll always draw a crowd. There are others that are good, but for some reason they just haven't become as popular, and they don't get a bigger crowd. Well, let's go on here. Establish your priorities. Matthew 12:8, Mark 2:28, Luke 6:55b. Jesus says it straight and simple. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And Jesus wraps his commands by appealing to a higher authority. It's not me you have to answer to. It's God the Father. And he says, I have authority over these things. Since Jesus is the Son of God, he is Lord over the Sabbath as well. And if his disciples want to eat because they are hungry, there's nothing wrong with it. God is the ultimate authority in all matters. And we need to advise a few of our politicians. We need to advise a lot of the people that elect those politicians. That God is the authority, not my party or your party or this cause or that cause. God is the ultimate authority on all matters. That settles it. What we do should be a reflection of our love for God and our faith in him. We want to reflect that love in a way we deal with other people, even if we're dealing with control freaks. We want to love them as much as possible. Now, there may be some situations where you've got somebody who's trying to control you or do something like that. You may need to just cut the cord and say, I don't associate with this person anymore. A couple that Sylvia and I married them back in California many years ago. And Sylvia was there with me. We were,
right before we got married.
Just before we got married. And after we got married a couple of times, something happened and they would become controlling and trying to be unfriendly. We finally realized we had to just cut the cord. I love you guys, but goodbye. We don't talk to them anymore. I'm sure God's got room for them. And when we get to heaven, a lot of these things that we differ with now, they do believe in Jesus, or at least last I knew. We'll see them again. But it'll be a whole much better circumstance when that comes. But we want to use love in how we deal with other people as much as possible. Now, Jesus again proves that the Pharisees, he reproves the Pharisees for their hypocrisy because they prefer their rules instead of seeking God's way. Obeying their rules is more important than loving God and loving people. Again, I've run into Pharisees. There have been times when I've been a little bit Pharisaical myself, and I've had to repent and change my attitude a little bit, change my outlook. And the challenge I'm going to offer you is, well, this is what I believe, this is what I want, this is what I do. Maybe you need to examine your views and see if you are being a Pharisee. I actually have a blog on my website. If you hunt it down, it's still there. I don't want to be a Pharisee. I think I've even got a sermon to that title. I might have to put that one on the list for some Sunday at Northside. What's most important in your life? Pure approval or God's eternal acceptance? Well, next in conclusion, God is more interested in whether you love Him than whether you are conforming perfectly to some rule of law. If you love Him, your actions will show that love. Now next week, this is not the last time Jesus will be confronted for violating the Sabbath. In fact, He's going to do it deliberately to confront the hypocrites of their duplicity. Talk about looking for trouble. But He's doing it for a good reason. So maybe we can learn something from that as well. Well, come and see. Right now we're going to turn over to page 90 in our books. That is our discussion questions. I have them up here on the board, but you might want to write answers down in your book. Again, if you read the lesson in advance, you can do the discussion questions, and you look at Sylvia's book, she's already got her discussion questions answered. No blank pages in her book. So, question number 1. Is the law of the Sabbath still binding on us today? Why or why not? And if it is, does it apply to Saturday, as it did in Jesus' day, or to the Lord's day, which is Sunday?
Wow. I might be jumping the gun here, but I heard a teaching on that a few days ago. I believe we're released into the whole week being a rest. Was that understandable?
There are some people who like to rest the whole week.
So did I fall off my chair or what happened?
People that think they're entitled.
That question is still subject to interpretation.
Oh, good. Thanks.
You can follow us and stay in touch with what is happening with the Getting to Know Jesus Bible Study Ministry on Plaxo, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and watch our video clips on YouTube and GodTube. Getting to Know Jesus is sponsored by New Hope Gospel Ministries. If you'd like to follow along with us and start your Getting to Know Jesus Bible Study group, or just pray for us or support our ministry, you can go to www.gettingtoknowjesus.org and find all the information that we have available for you. If you look at the lower right hand corner, there's a button where you can make a safe and secure donation to the Getting to Know Jesus Bible Study Ministry. Or you can go to the order page and order your Getting to Know Jesus books for your Bible study group. Thank you for stopping by, and keep us in your prayers and let us know how we can pray for you.